Good morning, friends. Hello, hello. Good morning. How are you? Hope you're doing great this morning. Hope there's goodness in your day. How is everyone on this Thursday? How are you, friends? Big weekend coming up. Tomorrow at 9 a.m. at the wall, at the Vietnam Wall, it is Purple Heart Day. So there's a celebration of all of those who have been wounded in the service of the nation, and there'll be a ceremony down at 9 a.m. down at the Veterans Memorial Park at Bicentennial Park, down at the wall. For if you have someone in your world that holder of a Purple Heart or want to be a part of that remembrance, will be there. On Saturday, we'll begin with our walk for the homeless at a stepping stone down at First Step Inn, and that will be a great event. And then we'll have the Mass Association picnic up in Taunton after that. And on Sunday at 9, we'll be worshiping in the garden. So we've got a great day to worship outside and enjoy some of the beauty of the garden. So we've got a great weekend coming up. Good morning, Karen. Good morning, Donna. Glad you're here. Hope you're doing grand today. Jamie, look at you go. Great. Glad you're here. Hope you're doing well, honey. All right, friends. Let's get going this morning. It is the 6th day of August on this Thursday at 11:11, and I'm glad you're a part of the journey, that wherever you are and wherever God finds you, there is goodness in your days. So there's this book called The Three Decrees, which it's a brand new book by a guy by the name of Ken Roach. But he has this really neat approach, and so I want to talk a little bit about it today, because when I heard him talk about it, I found it really kind of touched my heart. So I hope it has some things to offer you. But he looks at the book of Ezra, like everybody does, because so again. Yesterday we were in the Minor Prophets, back into the Minor Prophets. Ezra, not a big read, not a whole bunch of people get excited about the book of Ezra, but because it's largely this kind of dismal book that of the prophet Ezra. So the prophets are these people who are trying to bring corrective or bring encouragement to the people of Israel. And so, but Ezra's got his work cut out for him, because what has happened is that the people were captured by the Babylonians and dragged off to Babylon. That the world was destroyed, and the Emperor Cyrus comes in and gives this decree. The decree is that the people can return to Jerusalem, and that in their return to Jerusalem, they can rebuild the temple. They are permitted to rebuild the temple. That the way in which they had been connected to God is going to be restored through the worship at the temple. Yay, Cyrus. So there's this. So he allows that. So the exiles drag themselves from Baghdad back to Jerusalem, and they begin this first wave of exiles begins to rebuild the temple. They actually begin to worship on the site that they actually there. And however, there is this way in that Artaxerxes, who was kind of overseeing this, it begins to remember about it's saying this will be great. You guys will have this temple complex, and in the temple complex we can all worship. You can worship your gods. We'll worship our gods. We'll all just be one big happy family. And as you might guess, Ezra and the people of Israel balk at that. They say, no, this is our temple, and this is the temple to God, and we're going to keep that pure. and we're going to keep that for the worship of God and Yahweh alone. Well, this is a conundrum. So and what this pushback brings in this reminder of what Jerusalem was always about, is that Jerusalem is a rebellious city. That there's and you know, you weren't wrong. Like, Jerusalem always was a rebellious city. There's this way in which Jerusalem was in rebellion again and again and again and again, and then in the midst of that rebellion, that was part of the reason it was conquered, is because it just kept poking people in the side or poking people in the eye, and it was never big enough to necessarily conquer its neighbors, but it was always an annoyance. And so finally, the conquering by the Babylonians is kind of puts to bed this rebellion. And so here they are rebuilding the temple, but not allowing other gods on the temple complex, but worshiping God in their own way, in their own space, being true to the call that God has for them. And he says, well, that's it. And so he writes a strongly worded letter and to Artaxerxes, and Artaxerxes gets this, and he said the overseer basically says, look, this has always been a rebellious city. They don't want to play nice with others. You should stop this. You should stop this. And so Artaxerxes looks at it, and he goes back and he reviews the records, and he's like, by gosh, they have been a rebellious city. And so the second decree, there are 3 decrees. The first decree is by Cyrus that Artaxerxes sends the second decree, which says no, like, stop building. So he puts a cease and desist order on the building of the temple. And this is where Ezra and the Israelites have a choice to make. They can either abide by this law, and they can, as they reach the resistance and the headwind, or they can continue to do it anyway. And so Ezra goes to the overseer and he says, look, here's the deal. Cyrus promised us we could rebuild. It was actually his decree. And I know that we've got this other cease and desist decree, but we're going to continue to build our temple, even though you all tell us we cannot. And what the only thing we ask of you is that you write another letter. That you write another letter to the emperor and to the king, and you remind him, the Persian king, and you remind him of what Cyrus decreed. And so it's okay. So all right, but it's on you, or whatever happens. And so he writes this letter, and he goes back, and sure enough, they do a little research about what it was Cyrus had in fact declared for the people of Israel, and in fact, he did decree that they should be able to rebuild the temple. And so the third letter comes back, the third declaration comes back to them, and it says this: the third decree says, yes, not only do we think did we check your work and say Cyrus did in fact say you can rebuild the temple and you should rebuild the temple regardless of whether you're rebellious or not, whether we see you as rebellious or not, but also we as the empire, we as the kings, are going to use tax money to support, and that we are going to bring resources in to support that temple, the rebuilding of the temple. So not only, and so there is this, so it is the story of these 3 decrees, the first 6 chapters of the book of Ezra, is the story of perseverance and the story of faith. That given the call and the command to return home in this time of rebuilding, to rebuild the temple in its place, and then to have the world resist it, and to continue to build in faith in the resistance to the world, while appealing to the higher authority of God and to the authorities that are in, where then resources show up. I think this, we don't get this pattern just as I tell you the historical story, and Ken Rich does a beautiful job of this in his book. I encourage you to look at it if you want to. It's called 3 Decrees. But it really is the story of our spiritual journey. It's really often how we are called to work. That whenever we receive a call from God, the first thing we also receive, that baked into that call is going to be the resistance to that call. Baked into that call is going to be the overseer that says, wait a minute. You guys are not doing it in the way in the world, which the world says it should be done. You guys are not adhering to the ways in which, and in fact, you are being rebellious to the ways of the world. Try to quit anything that has a hold on you. Try to quit anything. Doesn't matter what it is. Eating brownies, any substance you want to think about quitting. Try and change anything. Try and take on your temper or your melancholy, like whatever. Take anything that would afflict you and try to change it. Try to go into the mode of rebuilding a life, and the first thing that shows up is the resistance. The first thing that shows up is the little overseer that says, like, nope. We have it here that you're a rebellious city, and we have it here that you're going to be a threat, and so we need to slow you down. We need to stop you because it's going to threaten the world as it is. We're going to threaten the way in which we get by. One of the great examples of this in the Gospels is the story of the well of Bethesda. So the man is laying on a mat for 30 plus years on this mat next to the well of Bethesda. That when the angel comes on the well, that if you go into the well, you are healed. But he's been on the mat for 30 plus years. And Jesus comes by and asks him this basic question, do you want to be healed? And now it seems like a silly question, right? Of course he wants to be healed. But consider this. He's been on this mat. He's been crippled for 30 years. He has been in his dysfunction, in his own kind of filthy little spot there on the edge of the thing. It may not be great, but it's his. He's figured out how to stay alive. He's probably got friends around the well, like the other people who just haven't been able to figure out how to get into the water for 30 years. Of course they could figure. Somebody could kick him down the stairs into the water when the water was troubled by the angel to be healed. Somebody could have, but no. At this point, the dysfunction is safer. The dysfunction is easier. The dysfunction is way more safer to stay than just as the Israelites. It was way safer for them to simply say, "Oh, the authorities say we can't do it. Well, we can't do it. We'll just stop building the temple." But the story of Ezra is the fact that when we encounter the resistance, when we encounter the workmen, when we encounter Jesus at the edge of the well, when we encounter that and we continue to stay in relationship, we continue to persevere, we continue to walk even though we may not fully know the way, when we continue to strive, resources show up. This is the promise of the third decree. It is this decree. It is the decree of glory, that we are built for glory, that we are built to receive all good gifts from our Father in heaven who wants to give them to us. But part of that is creating a space, creating that temple ground, and being willing to continue to work it when the voices in our head tell us, "Who do you think you are?" When the voices in the world say, "There's no place for that." When our friends or the people that we know say, "What are you doing? What are you doing? Trying to give up that or trying to become this." When we hear the voices that would shut us down, that we don't necessarily challenge them, but we simply, as the great flag of the American Revolution declared, make an appeal to heaven. That we make the appeal to heaven, that we make the appeal to the higher authority one more time. Now I understand, friends, you may have been down this road a lot of times. You may have been down this road and heard the decree of the workman and stopped your work. You may have given it up 100 times. But there is one more time to simply make the appeal to Christ, to make the appeal to God, to make the appeal to the one who made you, to say, remember your promise to us. Remember what you said, the way we would be, and remember that that consult the very record of creation, that our Father in heaven wants to bring you and give you all good gifts, that you may not act out in rebellion, but simply continue your work of building God's place in your life. It doesn't matter how many times that you maybe had a work stoppage because of the voice of the overseer. It matters only that one time you hear the voice of Ezra saying, we will continue to work, and we will appeal to heaven. All right, peace and grace to you all, my friends. Karen, glad you're here this morning. Donna, so good to see you. I hope your heart is healing and well. Jamie, glad you're here. Yvette, good for you. Glad you're here. Vicki, good morning to you. John, glad you're here. Peace and grace to you all, and we'll pick it up next week with another 11:11.